Product provided by Nintendo, specifically Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. Let's play a game. Xenoblade Chronicles is on sale right now. What do you think? Do you think that's neat? Do you think it's cool? Are you excited? Do you want to check it out? Now, focus in on that feeling. Now, how do you feel if I tell you it's only Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2 and Torna The Golden Country, and they're only 30% off? Now, how do you feel? Are you still just as excited, or do you feel a little bit deflated? I love Xenoblade Chronicles. I want to see this series and this IP continue to grow and prosper, because all of those games, Xenoblade 1, 2, 3, and Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition, are some of my favorite games ever made. I love them sincerely. I think Nintendo is not doing all they can to help this series grow. And I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about this sale going on right now that Nintendo is doing for summer, and these discounts. Hello everyone, I am Jmulls, and yeah, is it better than it being full priced? Absolutely. Don't get me wrong here. But let's also be realistic here. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a game that came out in December of 2017, and Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition is a game that came out in May of 2020. These games that are multiple years old, they aren't recent, even though it does for a lot of us feel as if it only came out yesterday. But they didn't. Let's also be cognizant of the fact Xenoblade Chronicles isn't the biggest IP that Nintendo has. There's no debate there, you won't hear any argument from me. But I think the ceiling for Xenoblade Chronicles is still very high up there, and I don't think we've reached that yet. And I've talked about before about mechanical changes and just overall tweaks to the formula that Monolith and Nintendo could incorporate into the game going into future entries like Xenoblade Chronicles 4, which is what I personally think is coming up next, that the series should incorporate if it's going to try and expand its overall audience and its popularity. But that is not to say that the games themselves aren't incredible as they are right now. Like I said at the start of this video, Xenoblade Chronicles and all those games within that umbrella are some of my favorite games ever made. I believe in them, and I treasure those games a ton. And I think if more people were exposed to these games, they would also fall in love with them. I don't think Nintendo is doing the best job right now currently when it comes to exposing Xenoblade Chronicles to more and more people. And I think this 30% summer sale they're doing right now is like the bare minimum, and like honestly maybe even a little bit less than the bare minimum. A bit of context. I am primarily a PC gamer. Most of my games and most of my playtime takes place on the PC platform as opposed to, say, a Nintendo Switch. I have a Switch, and I have a Switch 2, because Nintendo has some of my favorite games out there, such as Zelda and Xenoblade, particularly Xenoblade. But what this means is that I am exposed to how different marketplaces handle older games and try and grow various games, either directly or indirectly. What I'm about to say is going to sound kind of platform war-y. That is not the purpose here. I'm not trying to say other platforms are better than Nintendo, because I think Nintendo has a lot going for it, right? And each platform appeals to different people with different interests. We can understand that, we can agree on this. However, some practices are better than others. And I think something that PC gaming and Steam specifically does so well in comparison to the competition are these giant sales, one of which is going on right now that I covered yesterday on this channel, the big Steam Summer Sale, where a bunch of games from various publishers and developers go on steep discount, and it's a bit of a community thing, where people get excited, they want to talk about the games, they want to just pick up a whole bunch of games, and there's even a phenomenon that goes on that many people on PC are aware of one way or the other, where because the discounts are so steep and so massive, a lot of people just end up buying more than they're actually going to play just because they believe, hey, I shouldn't miss out on this deal is insane. What this can do and lead to is giving more eyes and attention to games that if they were still full price on a far less steep discount may not get those eyes or the time of day, compared to if you see a 70% off price tag, if you see 80, 85%, 90%, stuff like that. And yes, those are discounts you can see frequently on Steam sales, by the way. More people are willing to give those games the time of day compared to if they were full price, because people, well, don't have infinite money. But people love games, they love new video games. And whether or not a game came out last year or 5 to 10 years ago doesn't matter to a lot of people if they've never played that game before. And if you're willing to provide that game at a very, very, very reasonable price, more people are willing to give it a try, to take a shot in the dark with a game they may not be fully sold on yet. This can be a very powerful thing. And sure, when you're selling games at these giant discounts, you're not making as much money as you would if the game was full priced. Duh. However, what you're doing is you're exposing that game and that IP to new audiences, giving more and more people the chance to become hooked and longtime fans of that IP, where they otherwise may have missed it. This is a phenomenon that I think Nintendo, if they want to grow a lot of these smaller series, like Xenoblade Chronicles, could take to heart here. Obviously, games like Mario Kart, Mario Party, Smash Bros, games like Zelda, those big IP, they don't have to sell them at a big discount because they know those IP are so big, they're going to generate perpetual sales from people that want to go back and play those games. That or they throw them on the emulation service that is provided with Nintendo Switch Online. For games of that size belonging to IPs of that size, that is understandable. That's a wise business decision on the part of Nintendo. When it comes to smaller entries though, like Xenoblade Chronicles, you would imagine the idea and the goal is to take a lot of these earlier entries and say, hey, let's try and use these games as lures to draw in an even larger crowd so when we put out a new game, which is almost certainly coming, there'll be an even bigger audience of people that are already hooked on this IP that will want to buy that game day one, or week one, or month one, or year one for full price. Heck, we may even be able to ship some more units for people that want to play these games and want to play them the biggest, the best they could possibly be, with the power of the Switch 2 behind them. 60 FPS, higher resolution. Sure, you can argue that's a thought experiment, but I think it uses a lot of inherent logic. And I think, while, yes, Xenoblade Chronicles 1 being 30% off for only $41.99, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 being 30% off for $41.99, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Torna The Golden Country being 30% off for $27.99. Or you could just get Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and Torna The Golden Country for 30% off for $62.98. Yeah, sure, they are technically discounted. But if you still want entirely sold on Xenoblade Chronicles as an IP, I don't think these sales are doing as much as they could. Let alone the fact that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 isn't even discounted. Like Xenoblade X Definitive Edition, I can understand that because that game only came out a couple of months ago. And you're not going to put a new big game that you just put out down to 30% or less when it's only a few months old unless you're Dragon Age the Veil God. I understand that. But why not Xenoblade Chronicles 3? There's a lot of little decisions that went into this that to me are a bit baffling. And I can understand the logic Nintendo is trying to operate with, I just don't believe it's logic. Like I said, I believe the ceiling for this IP in terms of overall popularity is far higher than where we're at right now. And while some people absolutely will be swayed by the 30% discount and say, you know what, I wasn't entirely sold on it full price, but even with just a little bit off the top, yeah, I'm willing to give it a shot. There are some people out there that operate with that mindset. No hate to them. I hope they enjoy Xenoblade Chronicles, as I hope everyone does. However, again, these games are very old at this point. On top of these, like, honestly, kind of mid-sales for Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2, with the release of new hardware, we don't have upgraded versions of Xenoblade Chronicles. I've talked about this before. I think they are coming down the line, but right now, it's a bit of a wet blanket. Especially for people that get the new hardware that is supposedly selling very well. People may want to see what some of the most beautiful, gorgeous games Nintendo has to offer would look like with better hardware, and that's just not available right now. And if they want to just get into the series overall as new blood, and they want something new to play, not only do they not have upgraded versions of Xenoblade Chronicles across the board, but also, these sales for games that are years old are only like 30% off. I think more could be done to grow Xenoblade Chronicles as an IP currently. That's where I'm coming from. Heck, even if you knocked like Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3 down to say like $30, and you're just saying, look, you can pick up Xenoblade Chronicles 1, 2, and 3 for $30. Heck, I would go even lower and say $20. So you could say, hey, here's a really cool bundle that you could pick up if you want to get into Xenoblade Chronicles. Get Xenoblade 1, 2 with Torna, 3 with Future Redeemed. For $60 across the board, let's get you hooked into this series, so that you keep coming back for more. I think a lot of people would look at that value proposition and say, you know what? That's kind of worth it. For only $60, when games are starting to go to 70 and 80, for $60, I can get 3 incredible JRPGs that this one bald redheaded guy on the internet doesn't shut up about. I can get 3 games that can go for hundreds of hours if I want them to. And if you package it and you present it as saying, hey, you can get Xenoblade Chronicles 1, 2 with Torna, 3 with Future Redeemed, all for the price of $60, which is a full game price for other games, you get all this value for just one of those games. Because that's the math a lot of people do for Steam sales. Why buy a game at full price when you can just wait for a Steam sale and get a whole bundle of games for the equivalent of one full price new release? I get it that Nintendo doesn't like to do sales, and I get that even when they do sales, they can be rather stingy. However, I think for these series that aren't like, say, Zelda and Mario levels of famous, more could be done to increase their popularity and their future potential in terms of future sales figures. I don't personally think sales that are only 30% off for a couple of the older games necessarily do enough to draw enough eyes to this series in a period where otherwise we're very light for Xenoblade news until we get the next announcement. That's just my 2 cents. I think the best strategy Nintendo could have for right now is simply get Xenoblade Chronicles into as many hands as possible and allow the quality of the product to hook people to have them come back as recurring customers for this IP. I think what they're doing right now, it's not as if Xenoblade Chronicles won't ever grow or anything like that, especially if the games continue to get better. However, I think right now, in the short term, sales like this just don't draw up that much excitement. They're better than nothing, don't get me wrong, but it's just like, bleh. You know what I mean? And I think with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and help support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Leave a comment down below with how you got into Xenoblade Chronicles, or if you haven't gotten into Xenoblade Chronicles yet, why? I would love to hear your thoughts and hear your stories and hear your perspectives. Stay safe. Have a great day. Follow me on Twitch, TikTok, and Twitter, Jmulls J for all of them. I have a Discord in the description down below. Stay safe, have a great day. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again!